Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into something pretty complex today.
Absolutely. Should be a good one.
We're tackling the potential impact of artificial general intelligence, AGI, on the future of work.
Yeah, a lot of people are talking about this now.
And to really get into it, we're looking at a dense academic paper, The Future of Work and Capital, analyzing AGI in a CES production model.
Definitely not light reading material.
But that's why we're here, to break it down, so no one has to fear the jargon.
Exactly. We'll unpack the core concepts, see what it could mean, for the global economy, for all of us.
Before we get lost in the model itself, though, I think we need to be clear on what AGI even is. What makes it different from the AI we're seeing, like, right now, every day?
Good point. It's not just about, automating tasks, right? This paper stresses that. It's about this hypothetical level of artificial intelligence that can actually learn, adapt, and then potentially outperform humans across a whole range of stuff, a whole spectrum of cognitive abilities.
So not just replacing a worker on an assembly line, but potentially a lawyer, a doctor.
Exactly. Think of a system that can theoretically do any intellectual task that a human can, and maybe even do it better.
Okay, so that distinction is really important, right? Because it sets the stage for how big of an impact this could have on jobs, on the whole labor market.
For sure. That's the whole point.
All right, so then let's talk about the CES model.
All right. The CES production function, it's a tool that economists use, right, to look at how different inputs contribute to economic output.
Inputs meaning?
Well, in this case, the inputs we're talking about are labor, that's the human side, and capital.
Capital being like machinery, infrastructure, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the traditional stuff. But here's the crucial part. Capital also includes AGI in this scenario.
Ah, so the model lets us explore how AGI and human labor might interact, whether they substitute for each other or actually complement each other.
Exactly. And that leads to two very different outcomes, either job displacement or maybe like a huge boost in productivity.
And that's what this whole paper hinges on, right? Substitutability versus complementarity.
Absolutely.
Can we break those down a little more? Like, in practical terms, what does that mean when we're talking about AGI?
Sure. So the key factor here is something called the elasticity of substitution between AGI and human labor. Sounds technical, but it really just means how easily can one replace the other.
Okay, so picture this. AGI, they can do a ton of tasks that humans are doing right now, but faster, cheaper, more efficiently.
Right. And in that case, AGI is acting as a substitute for human labor, right? Which could lead to job losses.
Makes sense. But there's the flip side, right, where AGI isn't replacing us, but actually helping us be more productive.
Exactly. Think about doctors using AGI to analyze medical images with superhuman accuracy, or architects using it to design buildings that are super efficient and sustainable, stuff we couldn't do on our own.
So in those cases, AGI is complementing human capabilities, not just replacing them.
Exactly. And that, theoretically, could lead to higher wages, even for the people who can work with AGI, who can leverage it.
So it's not all doom and gloom, robots taking over the world.
No. It all depends on how AGI is developed, how it's used, how it's integrated into our systems.
We have choices to make.
Big choices, yeah. This paper really stresses that the future of work with AGI, it's not some predetermined thing. It's a set of possibilities, and we have a say in which possibility becomes reality.
That's a good point. A bit reassuring, even. But this paper also throws out a pretty unsettling idea, the collapse of human wages.
Yeah.
That sounds a little intense. What does that even mean?
Well, it comes from looking at, the theoretical limits of the CES model, right? Imagine AGI capital, the infrastructure, the algorithms, the computing power behind it all. Imagine that just keeps expanding, getting more sophisticated.
Okay, I'm imagining.
And the paper suggests that, under certain conditions, the value of human labor could theoretically approach zero.
Zero. Like, we wouldn't get paid for work at all.
It's a theoretical limit, not, a guaranteed outcome. But the idea is that if AGI gets to a point where it can just do most jobs better and cheaper than humans, then the economic value of human labor, it could plummet.
Okay, so maybe not everyone unemployed, but what do we do in that kind of world? How do you earn a living? How is wealth distributed? Even beyond the economics, how do we find purpose and meaning if work isn't what it is today?
Those are the big questions. And honestly, they kind of go beyond what the specific paper tackles.
But it's definitely something to think about, something we need to be prepared for.
Absolutely. Because if the value of human labor really does diminish, then we have to figure out new ways to ensure that everyone benefits from AGI, from the advancements it brings.
Otherwise, we're looking at a future with, what, a tiny elite who own and control the AGI and then everyone else struggling.
That's one possible and pretty bleak outcome. That's why the paper dives into some potential policy solutions, ways to maybe make this transition more equitable, to head off some of those negative consequences.
All right, well, let's take a deep breath, and then in part two, we'll explore those policy solutions.
Yeah.
Starting with one that's been getting a lot of buzz lately, universal basic income.
So universal basic income, UBI, well, the name kind of says it all. Every citizen gets a regular payment, no strings attached, doesn't matter if you're working, how much you're making, anything.
Yeah, the idea of like a safety net, especially in a world where jobs might not guarantee a decent living. I mean, it sounds good on paper, but how do you actually fund something like that? It's got to be expensive.
Well, that's what's interesting about how this paper tackles it. They look at UBI specifically within, an AGI-driven economy. The idea is a portion of the output from AGI, that AGI capital, gets taxed or funneled into a special fund.
Okay, so we're treating AGI like almost a worker itself, generating wealth, and then taking a cut of that to give to everyone.
Yeah, that's the basic premise.
But how do you decide how much UBI to give people? Isn't there a risk of setting it too high, making people not want to work at all, or too low, and it doesn't actually help anyone?
Right, it's a balancing act. The paper uses a variable, they call it lambda, to represent the fraction of AGI output that goes to UBI. And figuring out the best value for lambda, it's tricky. You want to ensure people's basic needs are met, but you also don't want to kill the incentive to work and innovate.
So find the sweet spot where people aren't desperate, but the economy doesn't tank either.
Exactly. And there's this mathematical model in the paper that tries to optimize social welfare, considering all these factors. AGI output, that elasticity of substitution we talked about, and the chosen value for lambda. They even factor in the cost of running the UBI system itself.
Yeah, I got to be realistic about that. It's not just like free money appearing from nowhere.
Right. The paper's very data-driven about this. There's no one-size-fits-all answer, they argue. The ideal UBI level, how you fund it, how you distribute it, it'll probably be different for every economy, and it'll change as AGI itself keeps developing.
So UBI is complicated, even if the concept seems simple. What about this other idea, progressive AGI taxation? How is that different from, like, the taxes we have now?
So with progressive AGI taxation, you're specifically targeting the capital tied to AGI, the algorithms, the infrastructure, the data, all that. Because as AGI becomes more valuable, more profitable, all that stuff, it's going to be worth a lot.
So like taxing the robots or the companies that own the robots.
Kinda. It's about recognizing that AGI is this new form of capital, and it needs its own tax structure. And this tax, it's progressive, meaning the rate goes up the more AGI capital you have.
The more you benefit, the more you contribute.
Right. The idea is to prevent too much wealth from getting concentrated in the hands of, like, a few AGI moguls.
Avoid that whole dystopian future where the rich get richer thanks to the robots
Yeah.
and everyone else gets left behind.
Exactly. Plus, it helps to keep the playing field level for innovation. It discourages monopolies from forming and stifling competition in the AGI sector.
So promote fairness, but don't stifle progress. Seems like a tough balance.
It is, but that's the goal. The paper makes it clear this isn't about punishing success, it's about making sure AGI benefits everyone, not just a select few.
Okay, so UBI, progressive taxation, those are ways to deal with, like, the money side of things. But the paper also throws out a much more radical idea. Public, or even cooperative, ownership of AGI, like AGI not belonging to companies but being owned by the people, by the government.
It's a big shift from how we usually think about things, for sure. But they present it as a serious possibility, something to consider. The idea is, instead of all the profits from AGI going to corporations or to individuals, they go back to the public to fund things we all need, social programs, or even like a direct dividend paid to every citizen.
Wow, that's a whole other level. A social dividend from robot labor.
It really makes you rethink the whole work for income thing, right? Like, if AGI can create all this wealth without humans needing to work as much, maybe our whole system needs an overhaul.
It's mind-blowing to think about. But, I mean, is public ownership even practical? Wouldn't it be super inefficient? Tons of bureaucracy?
The paper lays out a mathematical model for how it could work, optimizing social welfare through public ownership. But they're realistic, there are downsides. bureaucracy, potential for government overreach. It's all in there.
So no easy answers, it seems.
Not really, no. They're not saying any one solution is perfect.
Yeah.
What they are saying is we need to be having this conversation like now. Policymakers, researchers, all of us. The future of work, of our economies, of society itself, it's not set in stone. We get to decide what it looks like.
This whole idea of a new social contract, it's fascinating, but what does it actually mean?
Well, the authors are saying that, the way we've always thought about our economies, our societies, the basic assumptions, they might not work anymore in a world with AGI.
So, like, what assumptions? What needs to change?
There are a few big ones. One is the value of human labor.
Okay, yeah, that's what we've been talking about.
Right. Like right now, work is everything, right? It's how we create value, how we earn a living. It's tied to our identity, our sense of purpose. But if AGI comes along and can do a lot of those jobs better, cheaper, faster.
Then what? What happens to the whole idea of work?
Exactly. It challenges the very foundation of how we think about wealth, how it's created, who gets it. If AGI is the one driving economic growth, we have to make sure the benefits are shared, not just hoarded by the people who own the AGI.
Which goes back to those policies like UBI, the progressive tax, even public ownership.
Exactly. Those are all ways to try to adapt our current systems to this potential future where AGI is calling the shots.
And then there's this other assumption, the one we've always taken for granted, that you work to earn money.
Right. Income is tied to employment. But what if AGI can generate so much wealth that we don't need everyone to work?
That's where things get really wild, right? We're talking UBI, social dividends, decoupling income from work entirely.
It's a huge shift. We'd have to change how we think about the very concept of income. Not just a reward for labor, but something everyone deserves just by being part of society.
So this social contract, it's about way more than just tweaking a few policies.
It's about rethinking the whole system from the ground up. What is work? How is wealth distributed? What's the role of the individual, the government, in this new world with AGI?
The paper is mostly about the economics, but it also hints at this much bigger philosophical question.
Yeah, it's not just our jobs and our wallets. It's about what it means to be human when machines can potentially outperform us in so many ways.
It's like those classic questions, right? Consciousness, intelligence, creativity, even the meaning of life. Now we're really getting deep.
Those questions have always been there, but AGI makes them feel way more urgent.
Absolutely. And the paper ends with this call to action, saying we need to start having this conversation now.
Yeah, before it's too late, AGI is coming, and it has the power to change everything. Whether that change is good or bad, that's up to us.
It's a powerful reminder. The future isn't something that just happens. We make it happen with the choices we make today.
Exactly. We need to be informed, engaged, proactive. We get to decide what kind of world we want to live in, with AGI or without it.
Well, this has been quite a journey. We've gone from complex economic models to, like, existential questions about humanity.
And hopefully we've given everyone some food for thought.
Absolutely. The future is uncertain, but it's definitely exciting. And a little bit scary, but mostly exciting. So, to everyone listening, stay curious, stay informed, and let's build the future we want to see. Until next time, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.